Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Yes, hello everyone, and welcome back to Ask Rob and Rob. We've got two great questions in this week, one from Sam and one from Kieran. They're coming up very soon, but before we do, let's tell you how you can get involved, just like they have.
Yep, they are wonderful people, I'm sure, but there's nothing that special about them. If they've done it, you can do it too. You can give us a call on 013 808 0035. That's 013 808 0035. Or you can leave us a message from your laptop by going to thepropertyhub.net/ask. Okay, so let's get into our first question. This one comes from Sam.
Hi, Rob and Rob. My name's Sam. I'm a young guy. I'm looking to get into property investing. I've come across a lot of new build student accommodations, and I was looking for a long-term investment. But the only thing that I fear is the reselling value, because they are cash purchases. So I just wanted to know what you thought regarding them types of investments. And yeah, thank you. And I love the podcast, by the way.
Right, Sam, I'm pretty neutral on this subject. Oh, wait, no, I'm not. Okay. New build student accommodation, or sometimes called student pods, as a long-term investment. Okay, so one of the things that you fear is the reselling value because they're a cash purchase, and you wanted our thoughts on those type of investments. Well, that's the problem. One of the problems, I should say, is the resale value, because you're buying it as an investor and you're buying it for its yield. And chances are you're buying it cash because it's unmortgageable. So you're buying not really a traditional property investment, you're buying a yielding box. And this yielding box will hopefully give you a yield, but again, that can also cause problems in the future. I'll explain a little bit more in a minute. But sticking to the resale value, what you have is you as an investor buying this because of a yield. In the future, the only person who'll want to buy it off you is an investor buying for the yield. So the only way you'll see any growth in the value of this investment is if the yield increases. It may increase, or it may have been inflated in the first place. And this is the problem. There's a lot of bad news around new build student accommodation, and I'm sure amongst them, somewhere there is a good one. But the majority of them, all I can see is problems, and actually, I've heard a lot of problems about them. They pay great commissions, that's why a lot of people sell them, but it's not something I'd touch anytime soon. Now, rather than going on a big rant, which I'm more than capable of doing, I will put you in the direction of the Property Podcast, and if you go to thepropertyhub.net, go to the podcast section, there you will find a search bar. It's great, a general tool for anybody. This is a good tip. If you've got a subject you're interested in, try the search bar. But search for our podcasts we did on investments we'd avoid. We've done at least 2 on that very subject. And student accommodation, which I'll probably refer to in those podcasts as student pods, is one of those investments where I go into plenty of detail why you should not rush into it and possibly avoid it altogether. So go and check those podcasts out, Sam, and hopefully you can find an investment that better fits your long-term goals.
I was starting to think that Sam was your mate and you'd put him up to calling to give you an excuse to have a rant about student pods again, but you pulled it back, Rob. I'm impressed.
Well, you'll be impressed by Kieran, Rob, because he is from one of your favourite cities.
Hey guys, great show. My name's Kieran and I am from Edinburgh. You've obviously talked a lot about the 18-year property cycle, and also about how London seems to be on a cycle of its own. So I'm wondering, with the exception of the capital, do you think the cycle can be used as a general rule in all other parts of the UK? So like I say, I'm Edinburgh based and that's where I'm looking to invest. So do you think it will follow a similar pattern to, say, Yorkshire and the North, i.e. about to enter a wobble before growth? So yeah, that's my question. Thank you guys. Your podcast is fantastic. And any thoughts on Bonnie Scotland are always appreciated. Cheers.
Oh, he is. Thank you, Kieran. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Edinburgh. Lovely place. What about Edinburgh as a place to invest and where it fits in with the cycle, though? Well, another of our favourite topics, this one. And again, if you go over to the podcast page and search for cycle, you'll find lots of episodes about this. Well, as a general point, something that we've said before is that the UK as a whole operates on the same cycle because it broadly has the same factors. So it has the same government, the same currency, the same kind of broad factors that affect it. But then there are differences as well. So each local area has different things going on, different strengths and weaknesses. In Scotland, that's a bit more pronounced because it's got its own government and its own kind of political uncertainty as well. So you wouldn't expect every single place in the UK to behave in exactly the same way. And indeed, when you look back at the data, you can see that each region does behave a bit differently over time. But broadly, it is the same cycle. And Rob, I think worth picking up on something that Kieran said about London being on a cycle of its own, because we recently put that myth to bed.
We did. Really, really interesting podcast, if we do say so ourselves. But one of the most enjoyable for us personally over the last 50 to 100. And that was Back to the Future, How to Predict Future Property Prices. And that was episode 224. Highly, highly recommend you, Kieran, go back and listen to that. And anybody else who's listening who hasn't listened to that one yet, that's episode 224. Now, why is that so important? Because we'd made the general assumption in the past that London just was in a cycle of its own because it wasn't broadly following the main property cycle, the 18-year property cycle. But it turns out it was just doing what it's always done. And that is London goes first, a bit more aggressively than the rest of the UK, and then carries on in the second half of the cycle, but just not as aggressively as other areas in the UK. So to put it simply, London goes early, and then does continue to grow in the second half of the cycle, but other areas overtake it in the second half of the cycle. So areas like the Northwest and Yorkshire. So rather than breaking down that 30-minute podcast now into the next 30 seconds, what I would say, Kieran, is just be aware of that. We've learned, so we've updated our knowledge and updated everyone else. So go to episode 224, listen to that. It's a gem of a podcast, and I'm sure you'll feel a lot more confident about where we are in the property cycle right now, where Edinburgh is, where London is, and where pretty much everywhere else is after listening to that.
Yeah, and that should give you some confidence because Edinburgh, this time around, don't have the data for previous cycles, but seems to be a bit London-like in that it's gone a bit nuts earlier on than you might expect. So if we can convince you that London is not an exception and is following the same cycle, then hopefully that will reassure you that Edinburgh also is not an exception and is broadly following the cycle too.
So make sure you go and check out that podcast, the 18-year property podcasts, if you've missed those as well. And join us on Thursday when we'll be back with the normal property podcast. So we'll be back in a few days' time on Thursday and, of course, next week for Ask Rob and Rob. But until then, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.